Professor, it seems the message here played a very, very critical role for the voters. Economy, inflation, making ends meet loomed large, more than reproductive rights, more than threats to democracy, more than Trump's offensive and divisive words, more than the fact this man is a convicted felon.
Well, yes, he had to overcome quite a bit, and obviously was very successful doing so. You know, there are various analysts' positions on this. One take on the situation is that he was able to succeed by playing off of fear and loathing, if you will. And that certainly seemed to help him quite a bit. Kamala Harris was more or less shackled to the Biden economic legacy. And that made it very difficult for any other of her messages to break through. Her effort to focus on reproductive rights made some inroads, but not very successfully, of course. And I think it's worth thinking about this election, as some analysts have suggested, as almost like a boys versus the girls kind of event. Trump's support, particularly among Latinos, was much improved among males, and among men in general did quite well.
What about racism and gender bias?
Well, those are certainly rife within the Trump world, if you will. And what those attitudes hold in store for the future is going to be kind of hard to say. One really important point, I think, is that if you think about how American national government works, there are essentially four major moving parts. The president, obviously, that's going to be Trump on January 20th. The Senate, of course, we know is going to be in Republican hands. The House of Representatives probably will wind up there as well. There's also the U.S. Supreme Court, which in a sense wants to serve as an umpire, calling the balls and strikes for the baseball metaphor. And whether they'll be able to do that with the conservative supermajority of 6-3, which could even grow beyond that when Trump gets around, as he probably will, to appointing at least one more Supreme Court justice. So sometimes you hear talk about a trifecta. We have more or less a quadfecta here. All four of these will be in very deeply conservative hands.
Yeah, well, let me ask you about what happened in Iowa, where you are. A well-known Iowa pollster, Ann Selzer, projected Kamala Harris would pull off a shock in the state, a shock win, I should say. That clearly turned out not to be the case, which just really shows you how polls and pollsters can really get it wrong.
Well, yeah, and she really missed by the proverbial mile here. But a lot of the other polls, as you may recall, were showing, at least in the battleground states, that the results were essentially tied, which they weren't in the end, of course, or that Harris was ahead, at least marginally, in a couple of them. Of course, reality is quite different. But polls basically are not much better than snapshots at a moment in time. One of the things that almost certainly has happened, we'll find out more once the exit polls are examined more closely, is that late deciders gravitated heavily toward Trump, which, by the way, is about what happened in 2016 as well. Now, one big difference between his race in 2016 against Hillary Clinton and the race this time against Kamala Harris is that he also won the popular vote, or as far as we can tell.
Yeah, we're going to have to leave it there. Professor Mack Shelley, we certainly appreciate your take. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.